and welcome back for episode 13 of Popcorn Prosecco, a show that gives you 30 minutes of nonstop movie talk. This week we're going to hit Chef, Stage Fright, and Neighbors. I'm Perri Nemiroff, and here are my co-hosts, Kristy Puchko and Angie Han.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
All right, so I am kicking things off with Chef. This one's only getting a limited release this week, but I highly suggest that you seek it out because I loved it. It is directed by Jon Favreau, written by Jon Favreau, and stars Jon Favreau as Carl Casper. He is a chef based in Los Angeles at a really nice restaurant, and then when he wants to switch up the menu and impress people, his boss, played by Dustin Hoffman, says no, and then he gives everyone the same menu, and a local food critic basically pans him for it and kind of ruins his career. So now he's left with nothing, so he goes to his last resort, which is starting up a food truck, with his assistant, played by John Leguizamo, and his son, who is actually super cute, not like in that annoying cute kid way. And they make a food truck, and you could pretty much figure out where it goes from there. And that's probably Chef's one big problem, is that it is so incredibly predictable and formulaic. But at the same time, how can you judge it for being like that when it is so much fun and so damn uplifting? And I walked out of this movie not only with a huge freaking smile on my face, but totally motivated to just, like, stick it to whoever's criticized me in my life and rise to the occasion and make great things happen. What do you guys think? I thought you were going
to say hungry, because I walked out really hungry.
I was a little hungry, too.
I don't know if you were counting hunger as an emotion, but I felt it intensely.
It's amazing how cinematic food is.
It really is. So I like Chef a lot. I actually agree. There's like a point in the movie where I was like, oh, this is all we're going to do? Like, because it just feels like it hits a point and there's no surprises at a certain point in the movie. Everything plays exactly as you expect it to play. I didn't care, though, because it was such a sweet movie. Like, I mean, it's a Jon Favreau that, like, I remember really going crazy for when he was doing, like, Zathura. I know a lot of people love Elf. I prefer Zathura, so I'm going Zathura. But it's like, it's a very sweet movie, and it feels very heartfelt, and there's a lot of energy to it. And I wrote in my review, specifically, it's strange watching this movie as a critic, because there is a scene where he, as Casper, literally just screams at critics about how much negative reviews are hurtful. And but I have to say that the review in the movie is the kind of review that I take issue with, which is where, like, it crosses the bounds from talking about the food or, you know, the film or whatever, and goes into making personal attacks, and that's not okay. But I like the way they portrayed critics in this and creatives in this. And I thought there's like a cool backstory to it where if you consider, I mean, it kind of feels like he's just telling his own story, because he started out being like this edgy, cool filmmaker, and then he made a bunch of studio movies that first people loved, but then, like, Iron Man 2 and Cowboys and Aliens happened. Remember those guys? Yeah. And they were not so good. I thought they were fun. They're just not as good. And he got ripped apart by critics who felt like really betrayed to some degree or whatever. And this is his response to that, which is basically like, look, I worked as hard as I could. I don't always have all the power, which is basically what happens with Casper, and then he has to go back and kind of figure out what was really important to him about cooking in the beginning. And for him, it's a food truck, but for Favreau, it's this movie, and it's like it's very creation. It feels like his third act, which is kind of cool. But it's like if you don't care about any of that stuff and you're just looking for something fun, it also succeeds on that level. It's really sweet, and I gotta admit, like, I am not normally...
Oh, crap, I forgot that Angie hasn't seen this, right? I kept waiting for Angie to interject.
Like, shut up, Kristy.
Seriously. I was like, what are you doing? Stop talking over her. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that all of that kind of how he's reacting to his own personal reviews in this is incredibly heavy-handed. He probably could have put a lighter touch on that in some respects, because it's hard not to pick on that. But, I mean, again, it just brings us back to the point that, like, if you're having fun and you're liking what you're seeing, what's the big deal? He's just trying to express himself, and he's kind of doing it in a healthy manner. Unlike those reviews that he's critiquing, I guess, in a way, his movie's not hurting anyone. It's only making people happy and feel good. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, it's really sweet. I like it as a statement of his filmmaking, and I like it as a movie itself. It's like it's the kind of thing that like would be good. Oh, for Mother's Day, this is totally the kind of movie you can take your mom to see.
Are there a lot of
moms
really?
in it?
No, I
would. One mom.
I would no. It's not that it's like a mom movie and like it's about moms, like whatever that isn't something called like Mom's Night Out opening this weekend. It's not. I didn't see that, so I don't know. I don't know why I brought that up. Anyway, what I'm saying is this is a movie I would take my mom to see because it's sweet, it's funny, it's got a kid who is cute but not like sickeningly like movie kid, and it's genuinely funny, and it's like it's R-rated, right? But it's like it's not especially aggressive.
Is it really rated R?
I feel like it is.
I feel the need to look that up now.
I felt like that.
It is R. It's
right?
rated R.
Which
I'm very surprised. Yeah.
I guess it's because they do say the F word.
I guess.
It's not. It's the total kind of movie you can totally get away with taking your mom. It has Sofia Vergara from Modern Family. It has Bobby Cannavale and John Leguizamo and Dustin Hoffman and Scarlett Johansson and Robert Downey Jr. There's a bunch of people in it. Your mom will be like, hey, and it's sweet and it's funny. But I'm insisting people, if you go see Chef, plan for food after because it's just the way they show food in this movie. I kid you not, I went and ate from a food truck afterwards, like immediately afterwards.
Well, that was the best part about seeing this at South by, was that they had food trucks everywhere, and they had like a food demonstration too. And I just suck, so I'm a really picky eater, and like would kind of pick apart all the really pretty things they made. But I still greatly appreciated having food right outside the theater afterwards. But just to touch on some of the people that are actually in this movie. A couple people that surprised me was I really liked Scarlett Johansson, and I was watching her as though she was not just Scarlett Johansson, but she was like genuinely this character, which is really crazy because it's more like a cameo-sized role, but she totally like melts away into the part versus, let's say, Robert Downey Jr., who kind of just storms in, his typical self. And
it's the Robert Downey Jr. show, that scene.
Oh my god, he like tries to steal the movie for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's one scene and it's all like it's that whole deal.
You guys are making this sound like a Secret Avengers spinoff.
That's right. Well,
really, that's what Robert Downey Jr.'s performance felt like. It's like all of a sudden he would turn around and be like, "Really, I'm Tony Stark."
Exactly. Wink.
And then the food truck transforms into some sort of like Iron Man machine, and he flies away.
Now it's also a Transformers crossover. God damn.
Yeah, that too. We are in the summer season. Come on. But I also really like the kid in this. And, like, not just because the kid was a good actor. I mean, he was a very good actor. I love how they wove him into the story. Because normally in this kind of scenario, the kid is kind of just there to be cute and say funny things. The kid has, like, a major impact on Carl Casper, his success in this. Like, Carl couldn't have achieved what he had unless it was for his son. And they do it in a really smart way, like with modern technology. Like normally when you see texting and tweeting on screen, it's kind of tacky and it's distracting. This felt really natural, and they had like these cutesy digital ways of doing it that should have kind of taken me out of the story, but it worked really well.
Yeah, it's something, I mean, especially more and more where we've hit a point with movies where if people don't use their cell phones at times, you're like, why aren't they using a cell phone? And the movie realizes that and uses tweeting in a really smart way where basically, like, Carl Casper doesn't understand tweeting, but his son does. And it is something that functions as a plot point, but also as a way for the two of them to connect. And so it's actually really smartly done. And, yeah, they have a little bird appear and, like, the little Twitter bird flies off, and you're like, oh, okay, and it like communicates sending tweets, but it doesn't feel really hokey or like really like we're using tweets. Like it's implemented in the story in a way that actually works and feels organic.
It's not even just tweeting though. It's like all social media. Like that little kid in this movie is kind of like Carl's marketing man. And he does some really good things. I think that's like one of the first times we've actually seen that done on screen too. I can't think of a single time now that I'm thinking about it that we see social media used to this effect in a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's kind of talking to the meta context of the film too, where the idea
true.
That you don't have to have like anymore. You don't have to have a big studio movie to get attention online.
I am a big fan of this one, and I say go see it, and I say go see it over Neighbors, even though you'll have to do some seeking out. I think this one's only coming out in like 6 theaters, so it might be hard to find right now, but it's due to expand, right?
I believe it is, yeah. I say see it and take your mom.
That's a good assessment. It's too bad this isn't coming out closer to Father's Day, though.
Yeah.
That would have been really appropriate.
It's true.
But go see it anyway, because I love it, and apparently so does Kristy. All right, want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, this is a South by Southwest movie too, right?
That it is.
All right, so now
another one of my favorites. Oh, spoiler. Whatever.
We're going to talk about Stage Fright, which is the rare horror musical. The plot is basically a slasher movie set at a performing arts camp. It specifically centers on a young girl who, 10 years before, experienced the death of her mother, who was a Broadway star who died opening night during a show called The Haunting of the Opera. And 10 years later, she's working at this theater camp where they're putting on the show, and she decides that she's going to follow her dream and try to follow in her mother's footsteps to be the star of The Haunting of the Opera. But she doesn't want to die, which becomes a problem when someone starts stalking and killing people at the camp. I actually think horror musical can be really tricky because when it's not done right, you get something like Repo the Genetic Opera, which is trying way too hard and doesn't prove to be very scary or very funny. I mean, not that they have to be funny, but they tend to go that way. Like, think Sweeney Todd, think, Don't Feed the Plant. Little Shop of Horrors. Like, there's something about the darkness in that can work really well. I'm trying to think of an example of, like, a not funny horror musical, and I'm not coming up with any.
There aren't very many of them.
Yeah, not the word.
It's like
it's
nearly
tricky.
Impossible to pull off.
So this is a really great concept. It's written and directed by Jerome Sable, and it's actually kind of brilliantly done because it functions where it appeals to horror fans, where there's like nods to horror movies like Hellraiser and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's aware of the structure of slasher films in a smart way. And then it also nods to musical nerds, where there's an opening. My favorite number in it is actually the opening number at the camp, where basically all these kids sing about how they're nerds, and this is the one place on earth where they can be themselves.
It's very Glee, like early Glee.
But
yeah,
it's like self-aware Glee. Like I guess Glee is self-aware,
it's
but
like early Glee when Glee was a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper, and a little bit more self-aware.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the concept plays really well for the first half of the movie, but then it feels like the plot gets away from them, and it kind of like I think I actually wrote in my review that halfway through I wished that someone gave Jerome Sabler the money to remake the movie. Like I want a bigger cast, I want like more money, because the orchestrations and the music can use work, but the lyrics are really smart. Like, it's a really good concept. The execution fails it a little, is how I feel.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I mean, at first I was just like, whoa, I don't know where they're going with this. This is so weird and I love this. But then it kind of just, I mean, it never gets boring or like awful or anything, but it kind of just like the premise kind of runs out of steam, I felt like. And it really could have benefited from better music, because if you're going to have a musical, you should have some numbers that people actually remember afterward. And, this didn't really. I mean, it was fun to watch in the moment, but I didn't end up singing them afterward. And what did you think of the acting?
I thought most of it was good. There were a couple stiff performances in there, but I liked it overall. The only one that I'd probably really criticize that had an effect on how I experienced the movie was probably the lead. She was like a little blah for me.
Yeah.
But everybody else, I thought, really kind of made a mark, and there were a number of supporting characters who are only on screen for minutes, and those are the ones that I remember and took with me.
Yeah, I think the stage manager was like one of my favorite characters, and he doesn't really have that much to do. But yeah, I think I agree that the lead was a little bit like, she's supposed to be very, she's the center of attention, she's a protagonist, she's like special, like, she has something that sets her apart from everyone else at the camp. That's why she's like the most special person there. But then when you actually meet her, like, she's not that exciting. And,
you don't feel it.
Even beyond her performance, though, like, the character's just written really passively. Like, she doesn't actually do anything.
No, like, I guess she is kind of like the final girl type, but then usually those people, like, fight for their lives a little bit and battle the bad guy. Like, she's just kind of, like, unaware a lot of the time. And then when things are actually going on, she's usually, like, conveniently not able to do anything about it. It's like, I wanted to see a little bit more. I think I agree with Kristy, where I think I love the premise. I think it could have been executed a little bit better.
Yeah, it's especially for me. Like, I agree that I was when you asked about the performances, my first thought was like, oh, that poor wooden lead, and like her, I thought maybe she was cast for her voice, but then when you hear her sing, you're like, it's
It's okay. It's a little
okay.
bit
But the
like
thing is, it's like honestly, in a day and age where there's so many singing shows on television, it's not good enough. It's like, then they have Meatloaf and that's so exciting, but Meatloaf doesn't do his like Meatloaf thing. It's just like a little like it's like Meatloaf on like, a day where he has a sore throat or something. I don't know. Like performance-wise, he goes there, but singing-wise, I don't know that he can anymore. It's kind of hard to gauge because he does, and then they have my like issue with the singing was they have the slasher sing, they have the killer sing, and he does like this
yes,
metal
I wanted
thing.
to talk about this.
And it really killed it being scary for me. Like
I didn't think this movie was at all scary, and that was one of the reasons. So basically, you see the killer a few times, and you don't know who it is because he's like covered up. But his thing is that while everyone else is doing like Glee musical theater, he's singing like heavy metal with like a guitar and stuff, like an electric guitar. And I was just like, I don't understand that. It's like I guess I understand like the premise of like, oh, those things are really different, and like a guy that's super into metal wouldn't like musical theater or something. But I'm like,
that's the point, though. It wasn't meant to be scary. It was meant to be campy and to always have that juxtaposition.
But it was like a little like.
too
much for me.
It just felt too much like a first draft. Like he was really genuinely frightening to me before he started singing, and then for that to be this, like the singing itself was really lame, and like it really undercut the villain for me to have him just singing about how he doesn't like theater geeks. Like it just felt like such a lame motivation. Like I know that is the motivation, but just imagine like if Michael Myers all of a sudden started singing, just being like, I got really screwed up because my sister had sex in front of me. Like that's ridiculous and not at all like scary. And I mean,
I think they should have recast half these parts with you in it. This should have been the Kristy like one-woman show, and you could just play all the parts.
Jerome Sable, I'm on Twitter. Call me.
Oh, we should make that like our like poster tagline of the week. Like this movie should have been remade with Kristy in all the parts.
Before anyone
really
thinks that this movie sucks, though, I am obsessed with this movie. I'll admit, like, every single thing that you guys said is true, but I loved it to death as, like, just a B movie. That's what I loved about it. I love that everything wasn't perfect. I think that's why I had so much fun with it, because it was so silly and outrageous. And I also saw it in an Alamo Draft House at South by, which I'm sure that audience mentality kind of made it a little more fun than it would have been had you watched it on a screener at home. But I had so much freaking fun with this.
I did enjoy it. I highly recommend it. Like, if you're at all interested in this, or if you ever went to theater camp, or even did a really low budget production show of any kind, you'll find some humor in this. I think they really nail the stereotypes within theater camp, which was really smart and funny. There's even there's allusions to other, like there's one girl in there who's basically Liza Minnelli, which made me laugh the whole movie. But like there's really clever stuff in the movie. I just kind of I wish the execution was sharper. But like I feel like if you go into it like just expecting a campy good time and not necessarily a scary movie, you'll really succeed. But I gotta say, to the end of it being scary, they had some really excellent practical effects. There are some brutal and upsetting kills in this movie. So, like, that's where, for me, it was jarring, because I was like, with the singing of the serial killer, I was like, well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's not supposed to be scary, but then they would have those scenes, and I was like, but that's scary. So,
I want to talk about them, but I don't want to spoil anything.
I kind of feel like, I mean, like I said, I mostly agree with Kristy, but like Perri, after you talked a little bit about the circumstances in which you saw it, like this is a really great movie to watch when it's, it's nighttime, you're with your friends, you're all a little bit drunk, like you went to happy hour,
like the Frozen sing-along crowd.
Yeah, basically, this is. I mean, I watched it on the couch by myself at home. It's not. I mean, it's still fun, but it's not nearly as fun in that context as it is in like the context that you saw it. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you and your friends go out and have a few drinks and you're like, we want to watch something silly, this is perfect for that. But, if you're just at home, then you're watching by yourself, there's no need to go out of your way.
Yeah, I split the difference there. I watched it drunk. No, not drunk. I watched it while drinking and with my husband. So, like, I had, like, a little bit of the audience with me and a little bit of a buzz on and from my home. And that actually worked out really nicely. That was fun. We had a good time watching it and laughing and, like, picking out the references together. So
they have a lot of really funny details. Like one joke that like cracked me up that was really small was like in the background you see posters of like other shows they put on. One of them is called like Les Producerable or something. And I don't know why, but it was just like so silly and like that things like that kind of cracked me up.
It was like, and it was the same thing with all the nods to the horror movie. Like when the Carpenter kid like lifts the chains, I'm like, yes.
You guys are reading my mind. Yeah, there's like a little kid, he's like building a set, and then he picks up the chainsaw and jumps around during one of the musical numbers, and you're like, I know what that is. Yeah, and there's some really thoughtful, like, it's clever.
What else worked really well? That little girl that comes up out of nowhere, because they do it, well, Lispy is like one of my favorite characters, but they ruined this joke in the trailer, and you would think that it wouldn't work after that in the movie, but when she comes out, I still laughed out loud. So then that little tiny girl just like pops up, and she's like, isn't it wrong to be singing while everyone's being killed? And it's like wrong, but I love you for saying that.
To stop, and everyone's like, no. It just continues to go on. You're like, okay, all right, yeah, it's fun. I would recommend seeing it. You know, I'd say either in a theater with a bunch of friends, like a midnight movie crowd is a great idea for this. Or if you're gonna watch it at home, I recommend doing it with friends and a few drinks.
Yes, definitely with the drinks. Yeah,
drinks are key. And really, a group is kind of key too, because if you're like sitting there, kind of bobbing your head by yourself, it might be a little sad.
Thank you for describing my life as sad. I watched this movie so that we could talk about it on the podcast, and now Perri's like, oh, that's pathetic.
Well, next time a horror musical comes out, we should do what we've been planning for Popcorn Prosecco all along, and all meet up and drink Prosecco and watch and talk about movies together. Yes, that is the answer.
Yeah, I like it. And speaking of drinking...
Yes.
Speaking of drinking, let's talk about Neighbors, which is our final review of the week. It's the new movie by Nicholas Stoller. The premise for this one is actually pretty simple, unlike the last few times where I had to explain really complicated movies. Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne play a couple of, parents. They just had a baby, and they move into this, nice house in a nice suburb, and they're, very excited about their lives. Everything's great. And then their new neighbors move in, and it turns out to be a group of rowdy frat boys, a fraternity led by Zac Efron. And at first, the neighbors try to, feel each other out and get along, but pretty soon, after one time where the frat is being really loud and Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne call the cops on them, the relationship goes sour really fast, and then they basically spend the rest of the movie each group trying to destroy one another. So that's the premise. It's very simple. I'm very happy about that. Basically, I don't even know what I really have to say about it, except that it's just really funny. When I saw the trailers, I wasn't sure. I was like, they ruined a lot of the good jokes, but it was just really, really funny. I mean, it's a Nicholas Stoller movie, so it still suffers a little bit from lag, and it could stand to be a little bit tighter. But other than that, I laughed a lot. Zac Efron is really, really funny in this. I think between this and That Awkward Moment, he's trying to reinvent himself a little bit, and he's way more successful in this one than he is in that one. He holds his own against Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne, who are, have a lot more experience with this kind of comedy. And speaking of, Rose Byrne is fantastic. She's not one, I guess. She's the third main character, Rogen and Efron are the ones that are on the posters, but she's also pretty important, and she gets some great moments. There's I won't spoil it, but there's one scene where she executes a prank on the frat boys, and the audience that I saw it with at the screening we were cheering for her afterward. She's fantastic. I think it's time that somebody gave her a movie where she gets to be the lead.
She's the best. I really think that she should stick to comedies from now on, because I was getting really sick of her for a while, because I love Insidious, but she's a little blah in that movie. And then what was the other one? Was she in Knowing? Is that her in that?
I don't know.
It's someone else. That might be Jennifer Connelly. I don't know. Whatever. I saw a couple movies with Rose Byrne, and I'm like, you put me to sleep. You suck. And then Get Him to the Greek came out, and I'm just like, holy shit, you're funny. Why are you not in more comedies?
Ever since Get Him to the Greek, I remember when I saw that, I was just like, oh my god, did we know that she is fucking hilarious? It's kind of like when Channing Tatum was in 21 Jump Street and we all realized he was funny and then we all loved him like a gazillion times more. The same thing happening with Rose Byrne, and I'm so happy that she, then has done stuff, since then has done stuff like Bridesmaids and now this. But I want someone to give her like the Seth Rogen role. I want her to have the lead role in one of these comedies soon.
She deserves it too. Like,
really
thank God for.
She kills it.
I was a little worried about Zac Efron in this, though.
I totally was. After that awkward moment, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
totally.
movie was just like, there was actually a really funny review of that on Vulture where they wrote it from the perspective of clearly that main character is supposed to be a sociopath. And that was exactly it. Like, that movie was so just weird, and like it just made me be like, so Zac Efron like can't do comedy, right? Like, that was my thought. And then I saw this and I was like, oh, no, you give him a good script, like he nails it. He's so funny in this. And what I actually was surprised that I was very moved by in the movie is the relationship between him and Dave Franco, who they're frat brothers, but like they have a deep bond, and it means something to them. And it's like something that's kind of underserved in the movie, but it's still very affecting. Like
it's so underserved though. Like literally, that bond is non-existent in the first half of the movie, and then it's like, oh shit, we're almost over. We need some emotion, and we need to give Zac Efron's character some layers. Let's just shove that in here. I mean, that was my big problem with this movie. It's like, Angie, you said this was a good thing. I think this is what made it really weak for me, is that the plot was so simple, because it really was for a really long time, over and over. It's like, Rose Byrne and Seth Rogen do something to get the frat brothers kicked out. Then the frat brothers do something back to them to piss them off. And it really just went back and forth and back and forth. And, like, nothing was building. Like, no one was changing and nothing was really happening. And I was getting a little tired of it.
Well, I meant more that I was just happy
before them.
I just meant more that I was happy with
you had like
of explaining it, but I mean, I agree, and I think that that's a reason that why it loses some of its momentum about like halfway or maybe 2/3 of the way through. But it never slows down to the point where I was actually bored. And the prank, like them trying to one up each other, it does get a little bit dull. But the jokes and the pranks themselves are still entertaining enough that I was with it. I also thought that the movie was actually smarter and more emotional than it needed to be. Like you see kind of the way that Zac Efron and Seth Rogen size each other up and kind of see themselves in each other. Like that was a little bit bittersweet.
Because there's this whole thing with which is you're getting a little bit in the trailers, but I actually liked it in the movie where Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne are like kind of terrified to get older. Not exactly grow up, but to get older, to be in their 30s, to have a kid, to like have to, there's like one part where their friend calls them and it's like, there's gonna be this rave, come to the rave, and they like get themselves all psyched up and they're like, we can go to a rave, we can take a baby to a rave, it's totally fine. And like, I don't have a baby, but I totally related to those elements of the movie of just being like, no, I am officially fucking too old and over this stuff. And there's like a time where they like list things that that are considered for old people, but they like brunch. And I was like, yeah, no, I get that completely.
Which is insane, because I remember when I was in my early 20s, I feel like I went to brunch more often than I do now.
But now brunch isn't brunch. Well, that's because we went to brunch in our early 20s and we're still doing it, and now people in their early 20s think that's fogey talk.
I guess so. But yeah, I mean, basically what it is that both of the characters, but at both sides, are kind of like on opposite sides of this divide, where Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne are at that point where they are fully fledged adults, but they kind of don't feel like they're a little bit.
They don't want to let it go.
Yeah. Where it's like Zac Efron's character is on the verge of graduating, so he's about to get to the stage that they're at. So there's a little bit of bittersweetness. And there's there's some like cute little generational jokes, like when they're talking. At one point, Seth Rogen and Zac Efron are drunk and they're talking about like, who is Batman to you? And then they have this whole argument about like whether it's Christian Bale or Michael Keaton, and it's.
The right answer is Michael Keaton. I don't care when you were born. The right answer is Michael Keaton.
Which in real life, I think the two actors are only like 5 years apart, by the way, so there's not like actually that huge.
Yeah, but the divide works for the film, and it's like, especially when they keep playing their bodies against each other, which is a really smart move, because like Seth Rogen is, we know him, he's doughy and it's fine, whatever. But then like Zac Efron's body is out of control in this movie.
Oh yeah, Seth Rogen's character is a perfect description where he's like, he looks like something a gay guy made in a lab.
Yeah, and it's like they keep playing to that sense of humor. Like there's scenes with him with his shirt off where it's about looking at him, but not just for like sexual kicks, but just also for the kind of sense of like, yeah, screw you, every guy in the audience Because like that's totally it. It's like he. Oh, it's so funny. It just
This movie was the perfect movie for him because, like, I think he's hit this point where it's like we all know he's kind of that and just that, and like that awkward moment didn't work because it wanted to play with that, but then it tried to like switch that around and be like, no, he's really got a heart and he's learned something. Except this movie was kind of just like, fuck it, let's let him like go crazy.
He's way more interesting as like because he's not a bad guy. Well, no, he is a bad guy in this movie. I take that back. He's a bad guy.
In this movie, you kind of. I guess he's the villain, but you actually genuinely feel sorry for him a lot of the time. I did.
No.
There's and like one frame that made me be like, oh, you're psychotic. But for most of it, I actually thought it was like an interesting balance, and it worked for me, and I thought it was kind of funny. And I think
for me, that awkward moment kind of bled into this a little bit. Because, like, I really hated his character in that movie, and I had a hard time separating the two because there was only a month in between when I saw them. But his character's a monster, I think, in both of them.
But the difference is that...
Were you there at the press conference, either of you?
No.
It really bothered me in that now I'm getting personal and doing the bad thing that Jon Favreau doesn't like. I'm like getting personal with Zac Efron. In that awkward moment press conference, it really upset me when, spoiler for that awkward moment, someone asked if the fact that like his character didn't show up to her father's funeral would have been a deal breaker, and he's like, what are you talking about? They only knew each other for a couple months. Why would he go to his dad? And I'm just like, do you really believe that in real life? Because, like, that's not nice. And now I can't look at him without thinking about that.
I think the difference is that in that awkward moment, we're supposed to see him as a romantic figure, even though he's crazy and a sociopath and awful. Whereas in this, like, he's got a crazy side, but this movie doesn't pretend like he's like, oh, but he's like a really like awesome, good stand-up guy. Like this movie doesn't.
He's a bro. His loyalty.
Yeah, he's a bro. He's not a bad guy. He's not a villain. He's not like malicious necessarily. Like he's not plotting evil. But you know, you're not supposed to see him as like, oh, but he's like romantic and swoon. So I think that it works a lot better. I agree.
This is he's hot. We're not supposed to think he's like a dreamboat. It's a very different conversation.
Yes.
But I think the cast in this is really great. I do think that like per Nicholas Stoller. So Nicholas Stoller, it was a 5-year engagement and Get Him to the Greek, right? Am I forgetting one?
Forgetting Sarah Marshall?
Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So like he does a great thing where he's able to put together a really amazing cast. He fires so many jokes in the movie, you're going to be laughing throughout. It's just that he never seems to know how to streamline a story, so it can feel a little like, well, we did this. But I got to say, Neighbors made me laugh a lot, and it's really funny, and it's really screwed up, and it's a movie that's definitely fun to see in theaters because it's fun to see it with an audience that's all responding with shock and awe.
Yes, so pretty much everything that we have talked about this week, see it with your mom, see it with a bunch of drunk idiots. Actually, you can also watch this one with a bunch of drunk idiots. Don't watch it with your mom. It's a weird thing to watch with your mom. Especially, I was going to say unless you're like Zac Efron, but I feel like that actually would make it weird.
No, there's a whole dildo scene. Don't take your mom to this one.
There's a lot of dildos in
There are a lot of dildo scenes. There are multiple dildo scenes.
The best scene, though, is the boob scene. Because I've never seen a joke like that work in my life, and all I think about when that was happening, I kept thinking about poor Halle Berry in movie 43 and how poorly that worked, and then how awesome this. I hope Rose Byrne rubs that into her face.
Okay, no, I want to say, like, so, you know, like, there's a lot of movies where you see, like, a guy get hit in the testicles, and I feel like because I don't have testicles, spoiler alert, I guess, I don't know.
What?
Just in case anyone was ever going to see me naked. Yeah, anyway, so the point is, because I don't have testicles, like, you know, there's a limit to, like, how much I, like, really cringe when I see a guy get hit in the nuts in the movie. Whereas, like, the guys that I'm with will, like, you know, like, kind of cower and, like, do that thing where they start, like, covering up their balls. But then when I saw, like, I don't want to spoil too much of it, but there was a scene that involves Rose Byrne's boobs, and it was incredibly painful, and because I actually have boobs, I was just like, oh my god, is that a thing that happens? And it was, like, the most... It's not a horror movie, but that was maybe one of the most horrified I've been in a movie this year. Like,
I thought it was funny because if, like, I feel like people could go watch this back, but Perri mentioned that scene, and Angie and I just became like silent movie creations of terror. Where we're just like,
Because I was talking about it afterward with a guy, and this is anecdotal data. I didn't take like a professional survey of everyone, but like it didn't seem to horrify him as much. And I was like, that's because you don't have boobs, so you don't. This is not the kind of thing that you think is ever gonna happen to you. Like physically, it can't. And I feel, like I said, I feel that way about testicle humor. Anyway, so basically, if you're a woman, be careful when you watch this, because there's a part that will horrify you. Unless maybe you're a mom, then maybe you'll find it funny in like a, oh, I've been there kind of way. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't know. None of us are moms, so it's just upsetting.
Oh, I'm so upset now. I'm gonna cover myself up.
Go hold Roger.
I know. Anyway, so point being, to wrap up this podcast, this review, and also this podcast, watch Neighbors. Don't watch it with your mom. Be prepared for some discomfort if you have boobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Go watch Neighbors. Go watch Stage Fright. Go watch Chef. I like all of them. They're a lot of fun. There is just a shit ton of fun to be had at the movies this weekend. So if you don't go, you're just stupid. But that's all the time we've got for Popcorn and Prosecco this week. If you like what you saw, follow us on popcornprosecco.com. On Twitter, our handle is Popcorn Prosecco. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Popcorn Prosecco. And you can also catch all three of us all over the web. Angie, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at AJHAN, and you can find my writing at slashfilm.com.
And Kristy?
I'm on Twitter at Kristy Puchko, KRISTYPUCHKO, and I write for Cinema Blend. I'm doing a recaps of Game of Thrones every Monday on the Mary Sue, so check that out.
Yes, they're amazing. Read them.
Oh, thanks.
And you can get me on movies.com, Shaki.com, comingsoon.net, screenrant.com. We got this covered. Did I miss something? I feel like I missed something.
Perri also has a personal blog.
Okay, yeah. Go on Linimals Critical. It's all there. And my Twitter handle, Nemiroff. Enjoy that. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Cheers.